Greetings, my name is Kevin Matthews and I am the tax professor. Welcome back to class. Class is still in session because the learning never stops. And today we're going to talk about the election to file a joint tax return by non-resident taxpayers. And this kind of becomes a big question because there's several ways to go at with this. Okay, so and we're going to break all that stuff down. Now, before we go too far into this, there is actually a video where we talk about non-resident tax returns that need to get filed, and I want you to go ahead and take a look at that video if you haven't taken a look at this already, because we're going to really break down what determines which tax return you're going to have to file as a result of this. So if you're a non-resident of the United States, maybe you have to file a non-resident return. Maybe you have to file a resident return. Maybe you have to file what's called a dual status return, where you're filing part non-resident, part resident. And there's certain things that we would end up having where we would talk a little bit about that more in that video. But say you've gone down and you realize that you're a dual status person, and your wife is also a dual status person, or your husband is a dual status person. And you go, gosh, I really don't like these dual status returns because they make me do married filing separate. I have to pay max tax rates. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. Why would we do this? So the IRS actually grants you an ability to file as a married filing joint tax return and assume that you've been a resident for the entire year. It's an election. This is the code section on this is 6013, 6013, and it's going to either be a 6013H or it's going to be a 6013G. Now, the reasons why we do these sorts of elections is that each election is used for a different purpose. And so what ends up happening is you use the 6013G if you have a U.S. resident already, U.S. citizen, U.S. green card holder, or whatever, that ends up being, that wants to bring his or her spouse up. And so I always think of it as the G. You know, the G's kind of got like this little hook on the bottom. They're going to hook up the person and bring them up. And so that's kind of how I figure out what that is. And so what happens is you've got a non-resident spouse and you want to bring them into the United States. That's a 6013G. 6013H is when both of you are non-resident spouses in the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year you're going to be resident spouses. And I kind of think of that as the H. You know, H is in holding hands. So as the two of you are holding hands across the bridge, you want to become residents. And I know it sounds kind of weird. You know, there used to be an old saying that we used to say in the Navy, the dumber the mnemonic, you know, the easier it was to remember stuff. And believe me, some of my mnemonics get pretty dumb. And so, you know, but we have good fun with it. And so, you know, if you're going to try to get it to where your spouse and you, or your spouse is going to be a resident for the entire year so that you can file a tax return, you're going to have to do one of those elections. Now, there's a whole host of things that have to go along with this. I can't get into a whole thing because one thing that will have to happen is that there's going to be the election has to actually physically be signed and actually sent to the IRS for that. And so your tax preparer, oftentimes what will happen is they'll say, hey, look, we're going to have to do this. Now, the rules on this are constantly changing, so I'm going to hold off on talking about e-filing rules with these, just because of the fact that I know in the old days, back when I first started doing this stuff, you couldn't e-file either of these returns. You had to paper file both of them, and then they allowed you to start e-filing one of them, and then the other one, you know, my understanding, we were supposed to be able to e-file all of them after a certain amount of time. So what ends up happening is it can make your return a little more complicated, but at the same time, you know, you might ask yourself a question: why would I do a married filing joint elected to do married filing joint tax returns? And there's a simple answer for it. Married filing separate rates are horrid. I mean, they're just horrible. Okay, if you do married filing joint tax return rates, they're much more favorable. And so what ends up happening is you may have a much lower taxability just by checking a box and saying, yeah, I'm a resident of the United States for the full year. Now, there's some consequences that you're going to have to take as a result of that. So if you do married filing joint, say for example, you and your spouse arrive in the United States May 1st. And so from January 1st to April 30th, you are in another country, we'll say Germany, and you come here to the United States in May, and you're here throughout the entire year. So what happens is that both of you are going to be dual status tax return filers. And you kind of look at the rates and you're kind of like, look, we make good money. We're going to get killed on this tax bill if we don't get something done correctly. you can go ahead and you can do a filing, you can do an election to file yourselves as a 6013H, because again, both of you were non-residents at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, you are residents. Here's what's going to end up happening though. Not only are you taxable on the income that you earn here in the United States going forward, you're also taxable on the income that you earned within the same calendar year back when you were back home. So that's why you have to be very careful whether you choose to do these elections or not. And you want to take a look and see what's the best benefit. So if you take a look at it and you say, hey, look, last 3 months we were preparing for our move over here, so I didn't make a whole lot of money, or maybe my spouse quit working in this calendar year because we knew we were going to be making this move to the United States, and she wanted to take some time in order to get things set up, or he wanted to take some time in order to get some things set up. You may have a situation where that's a very favorable tax position. Some other things that can end up happening is that if you do include that income, well, what if you pay taxes in that other country? Now guess what ends up happening? You can use those foreign tax credits to offset that income. So there's a lot of complicated factors that go into this. Again, you want to make sure that you are talking to a professional who understands the international rules. And I will tell you, when it comes to 6013H and G elections, you really, really, really need to talk to somebody who understands international. And according to the ASCPA, that's only about 3% of CPAs in America. But you want to make sure that you understand it, because what ends up happening is if you bust one of these rules, or if you elect the rule for the wrong reason, or if you elect the rule thinking that it's going to have a certain effect, you'll find out it doesn't. It can really mess things up. There's also termination procedures for these elections that take place that you have to follow. So it's really important that you work with somebody who actually understands this stuff. Now, again, I would love it to be me, but more importantly, work with somebody who understands it. And if you're living overseas, chances are there's probably American CPAs who do this stuff overseas that are willing to help you out. And you might say, well, gosh, it's a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. Pay the money. It's worth it, because you're going to save a lot of money over the long term, and more importantly, you're going to save peace of mind. Okay, and that's really what we give you, is that it's peace of mind that it's done correctly. You don't have to worry about this stuff. So if you're having a situation where you're dealing with international issues, please feel free to go ahead and leave a comment in the comment box below if you have any questions for me. If you want to reach out to me more on a personal matter, you can reach out to me on my website at www.betasolutionscpa.com. Again, that's www.betasolutionscpa.com. And leave a comment. If you like this video, please go ahead and hit like. And then if you like the video series, please go ahead and subscribe, and we'll keep you up to date as to when the videos are coming out. I've got a whole bunch of them that we're going to be making over time, so saddle up and get ready, because they're coming. Again, my name is Kevin Matthews. I am the Tax Professor. Class is still in session because the learning never stops, and I want to thank you for watching this video.